Welcome back to the Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. This is Kate. I found myself having a lot of conversations recently about how differently people view direct communication and kind communication. The first is typically perceived as forceful, confrontational, or even outright mean. The latter, nice but inefficient, too time-consuming. Here's the thing, direct and kind are not opposing forces or a binary choice, but seeing them as such has contributed to the collective discomfort, I believe, with confrontation. I also think that we have failed ourselves here. For one, confrontation, when we look at the parts of the word, con meaning with, and front meaning face, it simply means coming face to face with a person or issue. It actually involves connection. Similarly, there is a lot of research about how conflict and confrontation, when managed well, can contribute to the overall health and performance of a team. Amy Edmondson's The Fearless Organization and Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team are great resources to understand the role of productive conflict. My father once mentioned that he'd consider writing a book on management by confrontation, not argument or disagreement, but leading by fully facing issues. So, in honor of Father's Day this year, and of everything I've learned from him, I'm pleased to have my father join me for this conversation. Welcome to the Comfy Chairs, Dad.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to take a moment so you can introduce yourself, please.
Okay. Well, I'm obviously Kate's dad.
Mm-hmm.
My name's Charlie. And fact is, that's how I've always been known, even when I was in a reasonably high executive position. Everything was Charlie with a small c because I was too lazy to capitalize.
Is that where I get it?
Yeah. I am retired. The last 10 years I worked, I was an associate dean at a professional school in the Department of Defense, and for 16 years before that I was an instructor there, or a professor, and before that I was a military officer. And for all of that time I'm Pat's mother's husband.
No, I'm Kate. She's Pat.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do we edit that out, or do we just laugh at the old man?
We'll see.
Okay.
I mean, you know I like laughing at you,
Yeah,
so we'll see.
I think that's probably a good thing. But no, her mother and I will be married 54 years this summer. And I'm a maker.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I get personal pleasure out of making things. I do woodwork, I do metalwork, I do machining, I do gunsmithing. I make statues and pictures and painting and drawing. I just like making things. I'm currently writing a children's novel that I hope to finish someday.
Yes.
So that would be I.
Yes. I have in my possession a desk that Dad and I built together.
Yeah.
And also a table that we built together.
Yes.
That's right. I forget about that sometimes because it's in the basement covered with things. But yeah, you are a maker. And you have had a lot of time in leadership and instructing people with leadership and other responsibilities. I know that you've held leadership positions not just in the military or in the Department of Defense, but also in your church for decades.
Yeah.
And this is something that we have shared a lot of conversation about, what makes for effective leadership and what doesn't. And I think we are probably of a very like mind around the role that confrontation plays, but it's one of those words that people get really anxious about. I lump it together with consequence and accountability.
Well, I think it's really important you define terms accurately.
Yes.
I always told my students that if you don't define your terms carefully, people apply their own definitions.
That's exactly right.
After a very short period of time, no one knows what anyone else is talking about. But I think we really have to differentiate between confrontation and conflict.
No, they're connected to each other a lot of
They
times.
can be. And in fact, confrontation is a way to deal with conflict. But conflict typically is between people.
Typically, yeah.
Confrontation even though it involves sometimes having to confront people, confrontation typically is with resolving issues or problems. It's the idea of clearly facing and delineating what a problem is. Now, in some cases, that problem is a person.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does require conflict. But confrontation management is not conflict management. People spend a lot of time trying to, quote, manage conflict. I believe that you should avoid conflict and manage issues.
That's interesting.
And that's what good confrontation management, I believe, will give you. If there is a problem, you don't let it get to the point that people have to be in conflict.
I want to go back a little bit and think about if I can verbally process this idea of avoiding conflict, because conflict avoidance can be highly problematic. So is it so much avoiding conflict or preventing conflict?
Preventing conflict.
Yeah.
You avoid conflict by resolving issues before they get to the point that people have conflict over them.
Exactly.
There is a real tendency, particularly in issues that involve people, for management to put off dealing with the issue.
Oh, yeah.
Until it becomes inevitable that there will be conflict and damage and loss to the organization. And that's why I've always valued the idea about early and well-structured confrontation before something can become a problem that requires significant error. Usually it can be dealt with by just simply dealing with it.
Yeah.
And as General Colin Powell was fond of saying, bad news doesn't improve with age.
No, it does not.
So putting stuff off very, very seldom makes it better. Now, I have to do an excursus on that because one of my management professors many years ago pointed out that sometimes your decision of the action to take is to do nothing.
Yes.
Which is totally different than not making a decision and letting things just mill along uncontrolled.
That's exactly
sometimes
right.
The best thing to do is let things try to resolve themselves. But when something requires intervention by management or leadership, if you prefer, I don't know which is stylish right now.
I use them wildly interchangeably, even though that's not necessarily the popular thing.
Well, I've been retired for over a decade, so I don't pay attention. But what were we talking about?
Colin Powell.
Oh,
choosing to
letting things
do nothing,
go along, and they typically don't resolve themselves.
No,
but there are times they do.
Well,
but that's a management decision.
Yeah, it's cost benefit analysis is one sometimes tongue in cheek way to talk about it. It's interesting because the episode I recorded just before this, it'll come out about a month ahead of this one, but it was a conversation about critical thinking. And what you're talking about is the application of critical thought, of intentional decision making, has to play a role.
Engraved in bronze at the military academy over one of their archways, it says, "When in doubt, do something." And the idea there is failing to make a decision is the worst thing you can do.
Okay.
Now, once again, that decision may be not to do anything right now, but it's still doing critical thinking, determining what the issues are, and coming up with the best solution, which in some cases is action. But that is a decision. It's not just, I'm sitting back and I'm afraid to make a decision. Oh, and I know what it was we were going to talk about. In issues that sometimes inevitably are going to lead to conflict, managers and leaders have a real tendency to kick it down the street.
Yes.
Not address it. And those things almost never get better. But if confronted early, usually you can avoid things getting to the point that they require conflict. Or at least that's my theory.
Yeah. What I'd like to do, although you've started touching on it, is ask you to expand kind of explicitly on this idea of confrontation management or management by confrontation. Do you see it as a framework, or is it a set of mindsets or practices?
For me, it was always a set of mindsets.
Okay. And those are?
in the managerial or leadership positions I've had, frankly, senior management doesn't work that much. You had other things you did. It's like, as well as being in charge of the academic program of the school, I was the money manager.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not familiar with how the federal government works, it's the only place that a good faith error can lead to prosecution and imprisonment.
Yes.
Mismanaging government funds can be a really serious thing. So that consumed a lot of my time. But the actual management part did not, because I had a good team of department heads.
Mm-hmm.
I had just good people working for me. So the only things that ever got to me typically were things coming down from higher levels than the stratosphere, or from problems that could not be resolved at the local level.
Okay.
A department head could not fix something. I'll give you an example. A very good friend of mine who had been at the school quite a bit longer than I had become intractable. And his department head had attempted to change his job. Don't do this, do that, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And he just said, no.
Oh.
I won't. And he didn't. And this went on for a considerable period of time. And finally, the department head came and he told me about it. And I said, oh, okay, ask him to come see me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, understand, this is a friend of mine. I've known him at this point for about 25 years.
Yeah.
He came in and I said, and I won't use his name, but I said, I understand that your department head asked you to start putting your level of effort in this area instead of that area. Yes. And that you told him no. That's right. I don't agree with him. I said, well, you understand, you work for him. Yeah, but I'm not going to do it. And if he tries to make me, I'll retire. And I said, well, it has really been good working with you all these years.
Yeah. Here's how you apply for your retirement.
Yeah. And he said, oh, I thought you would back down. I went, no, I hope we can still be friends, but you have a job to do. If you don't want to do it, then we don't need you here, and you do need to go ahead and retire. And he did.
Mm-hmm.
But all it took was, this is the answer. If you're not willing to accept the answer, then we're not going to keep fooling around with this.
Yeah.
It's not going to drag on. It's not going to take away from the department. It's not going to consume all your managers' time and all. We have two possible resolutions here. Let's look at both of them. You can do what you were told, or you can leave.
Yeah.
A and B.
That is a frightfully common occurrence. I was just talking with one of my coaching clients about almost essentially the same thing. Somebody who was told you have some flexibility in your choice of scheduling has turned into this direct report is just making it up as she goes along, and they never know when she's going to be there. Mm-hmm. She was hired to work an quote unquote off shift, and she's saying she doesn't want that. It's like, okay, go find another job. And not to be heartless, but if the work requires X and somebody says they will not do X, then that is not the job for them.
Absolutely.
This goes back to what I call the foundational leadership skill, and that's clarity. That you have to be clear about your purpose, your intention, your values, your expectations, your relationships, and what the job entails, what the work requires of people.
Well, to finish on that story, I believe we're still friends.
Good.
I know up until the time he actually retired, we had a perfectly good relationship. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that my friend came in the office and we fought. He came in the office and I clarified for him that he had only two options and he got to select which one he wanted.
That's exactly it.
And it became his decision.
This is a really similar... I think one of the mistakes that leadership has stumbled its way into in recent years is this idea that you have to convince or persuade people. Like, well, I've got to get their buy-in. I've got to convince them to do it this way. And the answer is, no, you don't. What you do need to do is create crystal clear expectations about what the work entails, what the like what is needed. And if it's tying back to what the job actually requires, then that's it. It's that simple. You need to present your expectations with respect. You need to be kind to people. You need to provide support if they struggle. But you're not there to convince people. You're there to make certain they understand what's expected of them and ensure they have the resources to perform.
Mm-hmm. Now, in an ideal situation, an employee or a subordinate should understand the job and they should buy into it. That's ideal.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't have the right person in the job every time, and they're not going to buy into it. And that's okay if they still do the job.
Exactly.
But if they're not willing to do the job, then they, having the right people on the bus, we need to get the wrong people off the bus.
Yeah. I'm not fond of the bus analogy.
Well,
I've just seen it overused and misused to the point where people are just being thrown under said bus. So yeah, I personally try to avoid it, but it's a
that's
useful.
Too bad. I like it.
That's fine. It's a useful metaphor for some people, but yeah, I think that's the thing, and it's whether because they're viewing this moment of confrontation.
Excuse me.
Yeah, you're fine. As a fight, a disagreement, as conflict. By putting it off, by trying to have these persuasive, well, they're just really struggling conversations, you are creating conflict yourself.
Yeah. And I think we can take this beyond personnel issues really easily. Financial issues, mission descriptions, determining what you are as an organization trying to do. Mm-hmm. All of these are areas that need to be clear. And I firmly believe the easiest way to have things clarified is, once again, through constructive confrontation. Mm-hmm. The people who need to make the decisions need to make the decisions. Mm-hmm. And quite often, the only good way to do that is to sit down together and make them, as opposed to putting it off. If I were king, we would get rid of email. We would get rid of text. We might even get rid of telephones so that people would spend more time looking each other in the eye and resolving their problems. Yeah.
Well, that's not feasible for a whole bunch of reasons. No. So what is necessary is developing kind of the attitude and the discipline of facing people and being really clear about your terms. So when you do have to send email, are we all agreed about how we're using it, what type of things we're communicating in it, and what is our shared language around any issue?
It would be helpful if there was a built-in 30-minute delay and you had to read through your email during that 30 minutes and certify to man and God you had read it before you sent it.
Yes.
And that would avoid a lot of trouble.
That would. For a lot of things. Think about it.
One of the most valuable things to me was when they built in the ability to recall an email that had not been read yet. I think I was able to make it to retirement based on that a couple of times. But,
it's so funny you mentioned that. I sent an email maybe earlier today and saw the undo send and thought, I really wish I'd had that this one time when I accidentally sent some confidential information out and thought I was going to lose my job.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
But I'm trying to think of some actual examples. Mm-hmm. A pericope's always better than a theory.
Yeah.
But I know there are times that I have seen organizations fail to make needed decisions simply because they were difficult decisions.
Yeah.
And once again, it never gets better. The sooner you make hard decisions, the better it is. That doesn't mean you make decisions before you have enough information.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we've seen in management with the growth of things like Google, managers are afraid to make decisions for fear there's information available they haven't got yet. I there's a term for that, and I can't remember what it is. It's something paralysis is the term.
Oh, analysis paralysis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you're seeing more and more of that, of people collecting information and data without making decisions when they've reached the critical point where they have enough.
Yeah. I think it is a form of collective perfectionism and a lack of realization that a decision doesn't necessarily have to be final, that you can have an iterative process as you make decisions. Now, there are going to be times where it is the final thing and things have to move when that decision's made. But there are very few actions in the day-to-day of most workplaces that you can't say, oh, that wasn't the best decision we could have made. We're going to rewind as far as we can and choose another path.
I worked for a general officer one time who was a really, really good manager. What made it particularly interesting that he was also a fighter pilot, and they typically are not good managers. Something about seat of the pants.
Yes.
But I remember one time the general had made a decision, and I didn't agree with it, and I went back to him with additional information, and he changed a pretty significant policy decision. There was another time I went back and tried to get him to change his mind on something, and his response was, "Don't you have anything new?" I said, "Well, no." He says, "Then I've already decided that. Get out of my office."
Yeah.
Which I thought was a marvelous response.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not
in both
get
cases.
Out. But yeah, it is.
If you have additional information, I'll look at it and change my mind.
Yeah.
Or if you don't have additional information, then what makes you think you're so clever you can change my mind after we've already talked about this?
Yeah. This is everything we've already discussed.
Absolutely.
That was what I used to come to my decision.
I hate to say it, but I actually think enjoyed the second interaction more than the first.
I can see that with you. Yes.
Yeah, because I love good management. I really do. And you don't see that much of it.
Unfortunately. I think there are a lot of people that want to lead well, that want to manage well, but this could be an entirely different conversation. It may be a tangent I don't want to follow, but it's we're just not preparing people to lead sufficiently. And we're not providing training when people are in leadership. And I say we globally, that is something that Gallup's most recent State of the Global Workforce has reported, that only 44% of leaders are reporting that they are receiving training.
Well, I think you're well aware. What is an organization's first reaction when it needs to cut funding?
They look at overhead, and a really common overhead that they like to remove is training and development.
Absolutely, which is the most short-sighted thing management can do. But I shouldn't admit this in a public place, but I'm an MBA.
Yes, I know.
And, long-term planning for an MBA is 6 months.
Well, and that was... 40 years ago when you...
Yes.
So long-term planning now is even less than that, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
You can set a strategic plan, but the 5-year strategic plan is... there aren't a lot of them anymore.
Yeah. But if I'm a manager and I'm having to look at reducing cost, I can maintain a good training program and be better off 5 years from now. Or I can eliminate it and have a better bottom line next year.
Yep.
For 1 year before things go down the tube.
Because
by then I've moved on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, but like you say, that's a tangent to what we're talking about.
I mean, I think it's probably because I like to force connections. I can see some relation in this idea of confronting short and long-term concerns. Really, it's I am facing what feels like the bigger issue because it's finance and it's earnings, where the long term, I don't have to face it yet. I'll worry about that later. And it is in line with what we've been talking about. And I think there's a lesson there that we've said it multiple times, so I'm repeating it for the sake of confirmation, not simply repetition, but you can't delay decisions. And if you see that there's a decision that's well in the future, or the implications are well in the future, you can't wait for it. But you can change your mind.
Absolutely. But we all know how well it worked out for Scarlett O'Hara. When
I'll think about that tomorrow.
Think about that tomorrow.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
It does not. It does not. One of the things that I see running through some of this is the question of the skill, competency, trait, however you want to classify it, of leadership courage. That having the fortitude, the willingness to face something, to not delay, does require a certain amount of courage, because we're talking about people's livelihoods. We're talking about reputation. We're talking about just common, everyday human fear of being judged, too. That some leaders, they may have to think about, am I making a safe choice or a courageous choice by not facing something?
Well, assuming you're dealing with good people.
Yeah.
There are the narcissists and the psychopaths and the sociopaths.
They're out there, but by and large.
Yeah. Many of them in high positions.
Yes.
But putting them to the side, good people want to be liked, and they want to do what is right.
Yeah.
And quite often those two things are in conflict. Because quite often if I have to make hard decisions, people aren't going to like me for it.
Okay. Yeah.
And what you see is, you're talking about courage, you see a lot of managers deferring hard decisions because they don't want to make people not like them.
Agreed.
And like I said, I was in the terrible position of having to fire a friend of mine one time. Not tell him it's time to retire, but fire him as his oldest child was graduating high school and going to college. Just had to. He thought he was funny, but he had harassed some of the female employees being funny.
No.
It's not funny. He had been told it wasn't funny.
And did not change.
He didn't change and didn't see the need to. He was a probationary employee, and I terminated him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
And
well,
but sometimes you just have to. If you're going to be in leadership, then that has to take precedence over being a buddy.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't like your people and be liked by them, and in fact love them dearly.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to make hard decisions that hurt people.
Well, yes. I was having a moment of kind of a visceral response to hurt, but it can be short-term hurt. It can be long-term. The way I think about this is I want the best for you. And sometimes the best for you isn't letting you do something that's not right or not aligned with policy or sets you up to be an ongoing problem in the organization.
At a higher level, sometimes you have to make significant changes to organizations themselves.
Yes.
And we've talked about this before. One way you can categorize people is there's process people and project people. Mm-hmm. Project people, we all know and love them. They're the people who like change. They value making something new or different.
Yeah.
I have personal worth if I came into a job and when I left a year later, things were different. They're valuable people.
Yeah.
Process people, okay, I am successful because I've been here 10 years, and when I left, you couldn't tell anything had ever changed. I had maintained the program. I didn't break the machine on my watch.
Yes.
Those are valuable people, and you have to have them. But if you make changes, the project people typically are just jockeying for something new. The process people are going crazy because you're changing their world around them.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to do that.
You do.
And it's just a reality that some people do not respond well to change. even if the change is to everyone's long-term benefit, the survival of the company or the enterprise, increased efficiencies, more profit, whatever your goal is.
Yeah.
But some people biologically are not set up for change.
Well, I could argue that we all are not. Some people, because we have that amygdala response to anything that feels like a threat, and any variation or deviation from our expectation, the limbic system reads as a threat. Some people, though, do have, whether it's chemical or physiological, they get over that faster than others.
Well, some people process it not as a threat, but as a challenge or an opportunity. Some people skydive.
They do. No.
No. We're both acrophobic. We don't skydive.
We do not skydive
but
in this family.
I know people who do,
Mm-hmm.
and they think it's thrilling.
Yeah.
Stepping out of a perfectly good airplane with a parachute someone else packed is fun.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But making major organizational changes, for some people, that's fun.
It can be, especially when they get to make the decisions.
Yeah.
Which is a big consideration, I think, in that discussion is
and
who's
then there are
choosing
people
it.
Making the decisions is the part that's not fun.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they should not be in leadership, and many of them are.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a very natural thing that we've gotten into talking about change in a conversation about confrontation, because that is the big thing. One of the people with whom I work closely, Peggy, we joke with each other that we could make the case that all leadership is change leadership. I could also make the case that all learning and development work is change work. Because you're starting in one state and you're asking people to do, even if it's just take action, you're asking people to change.
Well,
over time.
At a micro and macro level, if you aren't having change, then there is nothing to confront. There is nothing to cause conflict.
Exactly. But if you're not changing, you are not living.
I used to do in-service training for my faculty. And I had a graphic that started out with a picture of a dinosaur, and it morphed into the skeleton of a dinosaur. And the caption was, anything that is not growing is dying.
Yeah.
Things have to change.
Well, this is my pet theory that the majority of us, let's say 99.9% of us, fear change, I think, as this very visceral, almost primordial fear of death. Because as soon as we're born, we begin to change. And the inevitable end of that change, aging, is death. So I think on some level, we fear change, we being humanity, because there is a fear of death also ingrained in us.
That's the Kate theory, right?
It is. It's my theory. Like I said, it's my pet theory. And, there it is. It's just because, again, change can be the right thing. We know that change is innovation and evolution and progress, and we resist it. So why do we resist? It's typically not because the change is a bad idea. Sometimes it's because we don't understand it, but that can be remedied pretty easily. I think the source of resistance comes from fear. And what is the big fear other than public speaking? Right? Yeah. And the reason I bring it up isn't to be like, oh, it's just stupid. You're afraid of dying, so you're afraid of change. No, it tells us something about human nature and about if you were going to lead people, recognizing that many of the behaviors and choices that you see are driven by fear, unconscious fear sometimes, and not just your employees, but your own. So what am I afraid of? Why will I not face this thing? What are my people afraid of? Why are they not facing something? And can I bring empathy and compassion into the mix? Because what we do share is this human nature that makes us sometimes skittish and short-sighted.
Well, a substantial percentage of population are conflict avoiders, which is, I think, one of the reasons that for many years I really pushed the idea of confrontation management, because it's a way to avoid conflict, and that is very, very friendly to most people. If you can deal with something before it becomes a conflict, then everything's better. Processes are better, people are better, organizations are healthier. If you don't, then there will be conflict. And in any conflict, someone gets hurt.
Yes.
I mean, even if there are no losers, somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
And that's very seldom good for an organization.
It is not. Well, I also think confrontation ultimately builds reliability and trust, which I don't know that we have enough of in the workplace these days. So one of the things that leaders can think about is by taking that bold step to face an issue, to confront a problem, a thing, a person's behavior even, you are showing that you are willing to do a hard thing and that you are willing to continue to be clear about what's necessary to get the work done.
I always made a point to ensure that my department heads, if they had a problem with me, were willing to come see me.
Yeah.
People talk about, I have an open door. It's the closed door that's important, that they can come in and close the door and you can deal with it.
Yeah.
And when it's over, you still like each other. You still got the same goals. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. That's not the important thing. It's that the culture exists, that if you have a problem with the boss, you can go to him and deal with it.
Yeah.
And some of them weren't very good at it. But to help get around that is we also had a faculty council president. And I always instructed the new president, your primary job is being the guy who yells at me. If anyone has a problem and they don't feel they can come to me, your job is to come to me.
Yeah.
And some of them did it really, really well. I would have to go home and heal up. But from the standpoint of the organization, that is so important.
Yeah.
That at any point in the organization, you shouldn't have to sit there and ferment because you have no way to deal with your issues. You ought to be able to go up or down the chain as necessary.
Exactly.
And to confront those issues.
We're talking about feedback.
Pretty much, yeah.
That is the mechanism for confrontation in that case. So feedback comes out of the audio, like systems and engineering, and it's essentially when a signal returns to its source.
Yes.
And sometimes it results in that horrible screeching that sets us all on edge. But providing feedback to people is simply returning kind of the story of someone's actions.
If you want, I'll put my earphone over the mic.
Let's not do that.
Okay.
Thank you for the offer, though. But it's bringing something face to face. It's a reflection of what you've done. So feedback is a way to confront the results of your behavior. And we usually associate it with something negative, which is unfortunate because I personally believe the majority of our feedback should be, hey, Jane, you did a wonderful job. Here's exactly what was great about it. Here's the impact it had. Keep up the wonderful work.
My predecessor in my last job was also my mentor for many years.
Yes.
Professor Bresnahan.
Yeah.
And he used to practice something that I had actually practiced before I met him, but not as well as he did, that he always called management by walking around. And he would set aside time in every day that he would just walk around the faculty area and visit. And always manage to find something positive to say about everybody, or have a question that he knew they would like someone to ask them. And I used to do that too. Sometimes I'd go out and get a box of clementines.
Yeah.
and walk through the office and just yell, "Clementines," and people would stand up and I'd toss them to them.
Mhm.
And if someone looked at all troubled, I'd go over and visit with them. And it's amazing what you find out
Mhm.
just walking around.
Yeah.
As opposed to formal feedback. I've never found formal feedback processes to be that valuable.
Well, I think people need simple handles to understand how to do it effectively. And unfortunately, those have become concretized and receive bad reputations over time.
I tried really hard to get our software people to set up a thing so that when people logged onto their desktop computers in the morning, it would come up with a menu of smiley faces. Smiley, big smiley, small smiley, straight face, frowny,
Yes.
horrible. And the first thing you did each morning is you would punch one that was how you were that day,
For what purpose?
just to feel how things were going.
Oh, yeah.
It wouldn't say George. I wouldn't get a report that said George is unhappy today, but I'd have a little icon that came up, and it would be, all right, we're kind of straight faced today. Something's going on.
Oh, yeah.
My management didn't like that idea, and it never happened. But I like real feedback as opposed to formalized, fill out the form feedback.
Well, that's so. I'm going to pause us for a second to kind of
Sure.
get clear about some of the different forms and functions of feedback. What you're talking about in terms of formalized feedback systems and what you're kind of not thrilled with is the idea of creating avenues for employees to, as a body, to deliver feedback to their employer. Employee engagement surveys or...
I think surveys is the thing that I have the greatest long-term hostility toward. Because typically they don't survey what you think they're surveying. And the people who get the results don't understand what the survey actually surveys.
Yes.
I mentioned that for 16 years before I played dean, I was a teaching faculty. I taught a technical management course, actually several different technical management courses. And at the end of every course, we would give every student a survey.
Yeah.
And they would fill out this standardized survey that had been developed by the faculty to ensure it could not be answered in a way that was harmful to the faculty. And then...
smile sheets, the worst of all evaluation.
We would do an end-of-course evaluation, a report, where we would put in the survey results, and they would go to the department, and then they would go to the dean, who never understood them, ever. I never knew a dean who understood them. And sometimes they would come around and say, "Oh, you had such a great class." No, sir, it was the worst offering I've ever had. Or, "What went wrong?" Well, nothing went wrong. "Well, this is a lower number than you had last time." Well, yeah, because the last time I had a class here and everyone was here on a vacation pretty much, and everything went well. And this one we did out at their work location, and people were having to go back to work after the class, and they didn't have the time to dedicate to it. And we did have a hurricane that week.
Yep.
Well, I noticed that so-and-so's classes have lower ratings than so-and-so's. Yep. Well, what's wrong? Nothing.
No.
Well, why is theirs lower? Well, because it's a more technical class. It requires harder work. People typically like the softer studies more than the harder studies.
Yeah. And also, we're asking for people's reaction.
And it is an immediate reaction.
Rather than trying to assess and understand the genuine impact of that training. This is another rabbit trail I could take us down, because I definitely have a soapbox about program evaluation.
Yeah.
And how to measure the success. But that is a type of feedback. But there's like surveys and kind of like a large body providing feedback is one thing. And then there's that individual. We typically think of feedback happening from the manager to the employee. Occasionally there are organizations and teams that can establish peer-to-peer feedback. Either organically or programmatically. But with the closed door being more important than the open door, you're talking about feedback up to the manager, which I think is managers, leaders have to have a practice of requesting feedback from their people, that is how you know. And you make it safe by the first time someone gives you the feedback you've asked for, by saying thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Not arguing, not defending, not debating. You say thank you. And if you need time to sit with and process what you've heard, tell them that. Do it and follow up.
I think we're in violent agreement.
Yes, we are. We definitely are. I wanted to kind of bring that back, that I felt like we'd started talking kind of more about employee survey than individual feedback.
See, I don't even object to the surveys because I used them for years beneficially. What I objected to is they're being used inappropriately by people who didn't understand.
Yeah.
As you said, a reaction survey isn't a question of how good was this. It's how do I feel right now?
Yeah.
Did I have a good time? Do I feel good today? Is the sun shining? As opposed to, did I learn something that will help me a year and 5 years from now?
And can I demonstrate that I learned it?
Yeah.
Was the instruction such that I'm actually able to do the thing as a result of having attended this class?
Yeah.
And many training programs do not take that into account, and instead they rest on the laurels of, well, everybody left this class saying that, Charlie was a great floor show, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, I can make people laugh all day in a class, but if they leave and they don't remember.
I'm going to tell you a story.
Yes, please.
I mentioned that I taught a technical management course for years. Well, there was another parallel course on a topic I knew nothing about whatsoever, but they had a backup in students. They needed more faculty teaching that topic, and I was asked if I would teach it. And I explained to them, well, I don't know this topic. And they said, well, yeah, but this is just an introductory course. You just have to know more than the students. So I went over and I sat in on the course director's offering, and I took notes, and I listened to recordings, and then I taught his class. And if someone would ask me a technical question, my response would be, I don't know, I'll ask Rich and get back to you. At the end of that year, all of our students rated me as more knowledgeable in the topic than they rated him, because I had a better classroom presence than he had. He was the technical expert. I never gave an answer that he didn't provide me, but the students fed back that I was better at his topic than he was, which did not make him a happy man, by the way.
Well, honestly, frankly, one of the things that probably made you a more appealing instructor, not just classroom presence or style, but the willingness to say you don't know, that increases our credibility a lot of times. And
boy, I must have been credible.
Right. But it's, one of the things I think is important in the space of confrontation and leaders embracing it is being willing to be humble, that you might be wrong. You might have to confront something that was a result of your own error. You might have to change your mind about something. You may have to say, I don't know. And there is this false belief out there that leaders have to have all the answers.
I had a mantra.
Yes, sir.
That if the faculty wasn't smarter than the management, we needed a new faculty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every one of them was sure he was smarter than I was. So they believed that.
Well, it's one of my, I've written about this before. Leaders can't presume that they're the smartest person in the room, even if they are.
Even though we are.
I know, right? I totally am always the smartest person in any room. I am totally not always the smartest person in any room. But even if you are the smartest person, shut up. Like, let other ideas happen. And that is facing your own ego and setting it to one side so that people can be their best selves at work. Yeah. So Mom was in the comfy chairs recently with me, as you well know.
Yeah.
And we talked about lifelong learning. And I'm curious how you see lifelong learning and confrontation playing together. Do you see any relation?
You know, I'm sure there is,
Yeah.
but off the top of my head, this goes back to your first question.
Yes, sir.
Did I see this as a program or
Framework or a
framework
mindset.
and I've always considered it just a mindset.
Yeah.
And that mindset applies to everything, and it continues to apply to everything. So I am no less confrontational now than when I worked for a living, and I don't think I'm any more. It's just my natural reaction. If there is a problem, we solve it now.
Yeah.
If there is a potential for conflict, we determine how to avoid the conflict. If it's unavoidable, then we determine what we do to settle it. And you don't let things fester. You don't let things slide down.
No.
And you mentioned that even though I'm retired, I still stayed active in other things. I was the chief executive officer of our regional presbytery during COVID.
Yeah, that's right.
And one of the things I did was contacted as many of the pastors as I was able to, just to see how things were going. And oh my goodness, things were not going well for many of them.
No, they were not.
They had incredible conflict over how do we respond to this. Lost a lot of membership. A lot of good people died during it. It was a very, very difficult time. But it was the same kind of thing. Is there were issues that came up that caused division, that caused problems, and none of those got better on their own. They had to be dealt with as they came up.
Yeah.
And there were some really good decisions made. There were some really bad decisions made. But I've told you this before, one of my rules is you never judge a decision on the outcome. You judge a decision on how well it was based on the information available when it's made.
Yeah.
Sometimes stupid decisions work out wonderfully.
Well,
it's still a stupid decision.
Yeah.
Sometimes really good decisions fail miserably, but they're still really good decisions.
Yeah. I talked about this in terms of asking people to tell their stories in a healthcare setting. A caregiver can do everything right. Absolutely everything, not miss a thing. And sometimes the patient still dies.
Yeah.
Like it's what was the thought process that went into it? What were the actions taken? That's what you judge the performance by.
Tom Clancy wrote some really fun books, but one of them, The Sum of All Fears, is actually a management text.
Yeah.
And what it's about is decision-making in limited information environments. Yeah. And what he does is he sets up different scenarios where the protagonists or other characters are given limited information, and then they have to make decisions. And then people judge those decisions. And it's like, I forget his hero's name.
Is it Jack Ryan?
Jack Ryan. Jack Ryan is the National Intelligence Director at that time.
Okay.
And he gives the president a piece of advice based on the best intel they have at the time. And the intel is wrong. And the president, who is a moron in this, his response is, Director Ryan lied to me. No, he gave him the best intel he had at the time.
Yeah.
You have a submarine commander who makes good decisions based on partial information. You have another submarine commander who makes stupid decisions based on the same information. And he does maybe a dozen scenarios in this book where people have to make decisions without complete information. And I think everyone who has any idea of being in a leadership position, it would be valuable to them to read that. Plus, it's just a good book. And if you saw the movie, forget the movie. It's a lousy movie, has nothing to do with the book, other than we blow up Denver.
I don't think I got past Hunt for Red October in the Jack Ryan series. So
yeah, they're not great literature, but Sum of All Fears is a wonderful study in decision making.
Cool.
and you have to deal with some of the fictional parts of it, but he does a really good job of setting up these scenarios. And then people making good decisions and people making bad decisions from the same data.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought. I'm going to ignore that. So we're kind of at that point where we're reaching that natural close. So I like to ask if there are any thoughts or observations, either from the conversation we've had or that you would want to be able to kind of put out there just in general regarding effective leadership.
Well, I would say, from my standpoint, the best leaders are the ones who love their people the most.
Yeah. I'm not going to argue that.
Yeah. There are some 7 words in classical Greek that get translated love in English, all of which have discrete meanings. But the ancient Greeks believed that the most valuable one of those was phileo. It's where we get Philadelphia from. And it means brotherly love. But it didn't just mean the love between brothers, because we don't always love each other. But it meant the kind of caring that developed when people have a common goal. And the belief was that as you work toward the goal, you would come closer and closer together. And I think that that's what really good leaders do, is they establish phileo, in their organizations where the goals are clear. Everyone is helping one another get to that goal. The process is not doing for me. The process is getting us to the goal. And if you do that, then everything gets better. Organizations where it's just, I'm here for my paycheck. I don't have any idea what this company's trying to do other than make a buck.
Yeah. Well,
No.
So I don't fault people for sometimes just being there for a paycheck. There are a lot of reasons why folks end up.
You've got to have a job.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like,
I fed you.
Thank you. Thank you. You fed me. You sent me to college.
Yeah.
I am here because, so I never fault people for that. But if it's not clear to them what the purpose, the mission, what the work is, if there's lack of clarity on some of those foundational elements of any workplace, even the people that are there because of a higher purpose are going to struggle. I agree with you totally. I think the best leadership, well, you know this, I'm trying to write a book about it, that leadership is a love story.
Yeah.
And it's wanting the best for people.
That would be agape, by the way.
Yeah.
Different Greek word for love.
I know.
I used to give the last piece of instruction to all new acquisition officers in the Air Force. And the last thing I gave them was a piece of advice. If you're not having a good time, something's wrong. Seriously, we spend most of our waking hours working. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're going to have a horrible life. So I said, you need to do one of 3 things. You need to change so that you're enjoying it. You need to change what you're doing so that it becomes enjoyable, or you need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, change the job.
That's right, because A, you're not going to be happy, and B, it's going to hurt everyone around you.
Yeah. That's confronting the job itself. And do I change myself? Do I change the job? Or do I change jobs? Yeah, I listened.
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about that before.
Yeah.
I listened to you. Yeah. I think that's a pretty good place to stop.
Thank you.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time at work, and work is work. But if ultimately, in the balance, if you're miserable, something has to change, that you have to face it.
Yeah.
And make a change.
Sometimes it's you have to confront.
Right. That is actually typically the thing that has to be confronted. My own expectations and behaviors and mindsets.
Okay.
All right.
Do I get paid?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, just my love and devotion.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, as much as you ever get. So. Thank you so much, Dad.
Thank you, hon.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me today. If this conversation sparks something useful, please follow the comfy chairs and leave a review. Those small actions help more people find the show. Got a leadership question you'd like featured in a future Comfy HQ episode? Please send it my way. I'd love to hear what's on your mind. And when you're ready to move from ideas into action, 123 Limited helps leaders build stronger teams, sharper strategies, and better talent plans. Learn more at 123limited.com. That's ONE23LTD.com. Thanks for listening.